Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to see you, and thank you so much that you have found the opportunity to join our lecture today by our dear friend of our foundation, Ihor Lytvyn, Ukrainian diplomat with a huge experience of working in this field, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Ukraine, Chairman of the Board of the Association of Ukrainian-Chinese Cooperation. He prepared a special topic for you for today that is called Ukraine's Diplomacy Towards Global South. After the end of the lecture, everyone who has any questions, and according to our time, you may raise your hand, ask your questions, please. So, Mr. Lytvyn, you are welcome. The floor is yours.
Thanks very much for introduction.
I'm so sorry, please, everyone switched off your microphones.
Thank you very much for your introduction. I'm happy to be with you today. Good afternoon to everybody. I am Ambassador Ihor Lytvyn. Briefly, I graduated from the Kyiv Taras-Shevchenko University, the Department of International Relations and International Law. And then I worked for Foreign Ministry of Ukraine, and I worked for the Ministry of External Economic Relations of the Soviet Union. And within this capacity, I used to spend about 4.5 years in Bangladesh. It was related to the activity of Soviet constructors of power stations in that country. I used to be the Director General of the biggest department in the Foreign Ministry of Ukraine, which was covering relations, so to say, with 108 countries of the world, including Asia and Pacific, Middle East, and African countries. After that, I was appointed Ambassador of Ukraine, first Ambassador of Ukraine to Indonesia. Then concurrently, I was accredited to Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, the Philippines, Brunei Darussalam. Then I was working as Ambassador of Ukraine to the People's Republic of China, and concurrently accredited to North Korea and Mongolia. So I can confirm my huge experience, and that is why I'm here to share my views on Ukraine's diplomacy towards the global south. But first of all, I would like to introduce you the principles and values of Ukrainian diplomacy. In the foreign policy implementation, Ukraine will adhere to the principles of international law priority, commitment to the peaceful resolution of international disputes, and recognition of indivisibility of international security is very important. An effective system of international... I beg your pardon? Something wrong, or I can continue?
No, I think this is external noise. Please switch off your microphones, everything who is not talking now.
So, an effective system of international institutes shall serve the basement of maintaining the global security. Ukrainian foreign policy is aimed at feasibility of its national interests, which are protection of sovereignty and territorial integrity, creation of a favorable international environment, and strengthening the national security. I will consider in a more detailed way later. With this policy, Ukraine will contribute to shaping a safe world order based at mutual trust, interdependence, and international law principles. In the modern world, the security is indivisible and cannot be reached by unilateral actions or actions which are violating the international legal regulations. It's clear. It is intolerable to strengthen the security of one at the cost of another. Ukraine will seek restoration of international security at all levels and will be a reliable contributor there. In implementation of all foreign policy, Ukraine will base it inadmissibility of recourse to force or threats, reserving its right for the self-protection in compliance to the Article number 51 of the UN Charter. What we are doing right now, having the bloody aggression from Russian Federation. Non-proliferation regime, as well as international regimes of conventional arms control, shall remain being the key tools of maintaining international security at all levels. Ukraine keeps being actively committed to. Ukraine is a democratic rule of law country, and we keep confirming the democratic values and strengthening democratic institutions as a tool to reinforce the international and regional security. So what are the national interests of Ukraine? More detail. A wide range of interests and needs of Ukraine defining its foreign policy with the purpose of implementation of its strategy is divided to two major groups. The fundamental and primary national interests of Ukraine are the following: sovereignty protection, restoration of the territorial integrity, creation of effective and stable government institutions, including those in the area of foreign relations, support of democratic norms and values. Other interests defining the foreign policy of Ukraine are as follows: restoration and reinforcement of regional security in Europe, deepening and enlargement of the processes of European and Euro-Atlantic integration, which are fixed in our constitution, resolution of regional conflicts and development of mechanisms of sustainable prevention thereof, reaching high rates of national economic development, localization, and limiting the instances of international terrorism, reinforcing the role of international regimes, organizations, and institutions, effective operation of the UN and Organization of Security and Security in Europe on international conflicts prevention and resolution, reinforcement of non-proliferation regime and conventional arms control regime, minimization of risks evoked by transnational challenges, strengthening security and protection of Ukraine's allies. We have some priorities looking to the cooperation with the countries worldwide. Ukraine will aspire to the harmonic development of relations with the countries of different regions of the world based on common interests in different areas, including, first of all, political, global interests, trade and economic, cultural, etc., interests and communication. We, Ukraine, will stand for intensification of the trade relations and involvement of investments from the countries of Europe, Asia, of course, Northern America and Australia for extended access to the markets of the Near East, Africa, and Latin America. The priority attention will be paid to the cooperation with the strategic partners in the security aspect. Another important direction of the foreign policy of Ukraine shall be Asia and Pacific region, plus Africa, what we call the Global South, considering its size, intensity of trade economic development, and growing role and power of such countries like China at the global stage. Despite an announced level of strategic relations and developed contractual framework, the political dialogue with China requires to be intensified. Believe me, as the former ambassador to China, and believe me, as to the personality, which is who is the co-chairman of the joint Ukrainian-Chinese Business Council. Cooperation with China as with a geopolitical power, and I consider China as the second pole. One is US, and the second one is China. And this cooperation shall be considered in a wider sense, not only from the position of the economic cooperation development. An aspect of democratic institutional development of our state used to be important in our relations with Japan. However, the content of cooperation has a potential for expansion. Traditional coordination of the foreign policy process of Japan and USA, problematic relations, Tokyo, Beijing, precondition the necessity for Ukraine to work out an integrative approach to the relations with the Asia Pacific region and the whole global South. As you know, we got the bloody war and whole-scale aggression from the Russian Federation. So diplomacy in this case should be a specific one. Diplomacy in a wartime. Russia's full-scale invasion poses an existential threat to Ukraine's statehood, to our nation. As a result, Kyiv's approach to foreign affairs has undergone a profound transformation. The country's ongoing diplomatic offensive focuses on securing political and military guarantees while also mobilizing resources. This strategy is aimed at not only repelling the aggressors, but also on rebuilding the country into a modern, resilient democracy capable of defending itself against future threats. They are existing, as you know. A war of this magnitude and brutality, however, leaves little room for diplomatic course. With its society put under an exceptional level of stress from day one, Ukraine had little choice but to be less diplomatic and more straightforward about what it needs and when it should be delivered, be it regarding political decisions like European Union and NATO membership, or the acquisition of new batches of military equipment from all over the world, from our friends, including friends living in the so-called Global South. Nevertheless, diplomacy remains a crucial instrument for maintaining the international community's support for Ukraine, enabling the country to succeed both on the battlefield as well as in the process of post-war recovery and transformation. The substantial Western support for Ukraine has been widely recognized as a meaningful endeavor in addressing the nation's ongoing challenge. Because we do think, and I hope that in Europe they think the same way, we are protecting not only Ukraine, our nation, our people, but protecting the whole Europe and to some extent the whole world. Because if we lose, then the aggressor will not stop and will go further for sure. At the same time, Kiev's strategy to gain support in the global south, where Asian states are playing the leading role, has so far fallen short of delivering similar results. This touches the significance of securing support from the global south for Ukraine war effort. What steps need to be taken to enhance the success and effectiveness of Ukraine diplomatic initiatives in the global south, you may ask? Answering this question, we have to understand that Russia's renewed aggression underscores Ukraine's strategic foreign and security policy goals, which are membership in the European Union and North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Russia's brutal attack in February 24th, 2022, has led to unprecedented unification of public opinion in Ukraine. Domestically, the objectives of joining the European Union and NATO are no longer seen as a mere political choice, but rather as an existential necessity for Ukraine to remain a sovereign democratic state capable of meeting its citizens' needs. And mainly, we are defending our choice to live in this land. From a geopolitical perspective, Russia's aggression and Ukraine's effective resistance have led to a shift in the overall political climate in Europe, increasingly reminiscent of the Cold War era. This transformation is characterized by deteriorating diplomatic relations and a growing tendency for militaristic rhetoric and violent actions to advance one's own interests. This evolving dynamic has changed Ukraine's long-standing role as a buffer state between the West and Russia. And through unprecedented political, economic, and military support from both sides of the Atlantic, official Kiev, is actively being integrated into the Western peace and security architecture, de facto becoming not a buffer state, but a border state in the East. So we are Europe, in the center of Europe here in Ukraine, as we know. And we are the state which is the last border at the east of Europe. Ukraine's growing inclusion in the Western bloc also increasingly impacts how Kiev is perceived outside Europe. And here we have to consider the role of Global South. Moscow's failed attempt at a blitzkrieg at the beginning of the invasion turned into a merciless war of attrition. It became increasingly evident to Ukrainian leaders that the outcome of this war would not be solely decided on the battlefield. To counter Russia's ongoing aggression and limit its access to resources for both present and future hostilities, which are absolutely expected, Ukraine recognized the necessity of seeking support, strengthening existing alliances, and forgiving new partnerships with countries in the Global South. Therefore, by the end of 2022, our President Vladimir Zelensky, for the first time in the country's history, designated the Global South as a priority in Ukraine's diplomatic efforts. This strategic shift is grounded in the following three rationales. Firstly, in light of the unprecedented Western sanctions, Russia has successfully diversified its economic partnership in the Global South. You know about that. Establishing new and strengthening existing supply chains outside Europe. To further isolate Russia Ukraine must also formulate a comprehensive strategy for engagement with the global South. It is very, very important. For decades, Ukraine prioritized partnership with the European Union, United States, and Russia due to its limited human and financial resources. As a result, Kiev's ability to engage with the global South has been and remains restricted. Ukraine's success, therefore, depends on its ability to collaborate with other European countries and the European Union in redefining and rejuvenating relations with global South countries, possibly assuming a leading role in the process. Reaching acceptable terms for all parties engaged in the peace negotiation will require great diplomatic effort. Secondly, Russia's invasion sent shockwaves well beyond Europe, affecting countries in the global South as well, including triggering issues like food crisis. Regarding the diplomatic offensive, Kiev hopes that the anti-colonial nature of Ukraine's defense against an aggressor with neo-imperialistic tendencies may strike a chord of sympathy among global South nations, particularly of those which share a deep post-colonial trauma. However, while Europe, with some exceptions like Hungary, to some extent Slovakia, has been very supportive of Ukraine's resistance efforts, the reaction from countries in the global South has been moderate. This restraint is noticeable across the various experts, from official communication about Russian invasion to voting behavior in multilateral institutions such as the United Nations. Third aspect, a growing number of countries, including China, South Africa, Brazil, and India, this organizations like BRICS, Shanghai Organization of Cooperation, have expressed their political willingness to contribute to ending this war that has negative global prospects, each presenting their own peace proposal. Yet, all these proposals contain terms that are deemed unacceptable or very close to being unacceptable for Ukraine. For example, regarding territorial concessions, some propose that, okay, if you want to stop the war, you have to accept territorial occupation made by Russia. It's absolutely unacceptable. Kiev's and Western interests are aligned in the promotion of Zelensky's peace formula, 10 points or formula, which prioritized Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty as an imperative precondition for achieving lasting peace. How can we accept proposals which does not contain the territorial integrity of Ukraine? It's impossible, absolutely. This underscores the importance of adhering to a rules-based international order. Reaching acceptable terms for all parties engaged in the peace negotiations will require great diplomatic efforts, as I told. Kiev faces an immense challenge and outside the global South, as it needs to interact with a diverse array of states. Ukraine must engage with states that directly support Russia's invasion, like Iran, Syria, North Korea, states that display a neutral position, like in Southeast Asia, states that gradually move towards supporting Ukraine, like Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, and states that have already shown tangible support to Ukraine, like Australia, New Zealand, and some other countries. To make this task even more challenging, While G7 nations have unanimously expressed their support for Ukraine, members of larger forums like the G20 hold diverse viewpoints on Russian act of aggression. How does Ukraine navigate this complex and sometimes unfavorable environment, and what steps can the country make to enhance the success of these efforts? This is a big issue, a big problem. Several factors and developments hinder efforts to unite the international community in condemning Russia's violation of the rule-based order and undermine Ukraine's diplomatic initiative. Geographical remoteness stands out as a significant factor contributing to the lack of stronger interest among global South countries in ending Russia's aggression against Ukraine. The smaller and often economically vulnerable and fragile states in distant regions have limited resources and little inclination to pursue foreign policy objectives outside their immediate geographic proximity. Simultaneously, countries of the global South are increasingly vocal about their underrepresentation in major multilateral institutions such as United Nations and the perceived ineffectiveness of these organizations. Many global South nations view Ukraine as a part of Western-led multilateralism, which is struggling to address pressing modern challenges like climate change, food security, migration, and public health. In this context, not only Kyiv, but also numerous European governments find it increasingly challenging to counter the influence of non-democratic regimes and their anti-Western narratives. To address these issues, the European Union must not only reconsider its communication strategies, but above all, present a credible proposition focused on establishing sustainable, equal, and fair, which is most important, fair partnership that go beyond traditional aid and development programs. Many countries in the global South, for reasons already described, do not criticize Russia's renewed colonial effort in Europe. These countries perceive Ukraine not as a sovereign actor, but as a proxy of the collective West, whose members have gained a questionable reputation due to their historical post-colonial legacy in the region. Up to this point, Ukraine's diplomatic efforts have focused mostly on presenting Russia as a primary threat to the Western way of life. I mean, values, institutions, freedoms, and principles. However, such a stance can be perceived as civilizational, exclusive outside the global north. Instead, to gain allies in the global south, Kyiv should aim to find the right narrative that conveys the notion that the ongoing suffering and injustice in Ukraine are just as important as the need to reconcile with the post-colonial past of many societies of the global south. Then Ukraine will be absolutely understood and supported. So-called middle powers like Turkey, India, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia see an opportunity to assert their autonomy in foreign policy within a shifting security landscape. They are increasingly inclined to non-alignment with the West. This decision is motivated not only by growing ideological divergence with the Western bloc, but also by pragmatic, long-term economic considerations. Furthermore, rising major powers such as China are using the tensions surrounding the war to promote an alternative vision of what they see as a Western-dominated international order, if you understand what I mean. In their narrative, the voices of the Global South are not sufficiently included in shaping the global affairs. What are the steps towards the diplomatic success? Prior to 2022, Ukraine's engagement in the Global South primarily focused on establishing mutually beneficial economic cooperation with major actors like BRICS countries, like Shanghai Organizational Cooperation, etc. However, since the start of the war, Kyiv's goal of fully isolating Russia internationally has proven unattainable for both Ukraine and its partners. Nevertheless, Ukraine's diplomatic strategy in the Global South has become more effective due to Kyiv's persistency to reach its foreign policy goals, supported by its allies and effective strategic communication. For example, in June 2022, Indonesian President Joko Widodo became the first Asian leader to visit Kyiv. And 13 months into the invasion, China leader Xi Jinping finally engaged with Zelensky through a call. But I have my own personal opinion that this is because we do not nothing, but very small something to get China to express its real willingness to follow the relations of strategic partnership, because we do have strategic partnerships since 2011. Subsequently, in May 2023, this step was followed by an official visit from the high-ranked diplomat, the special envoy of Beijing, Ambassador Ihor, and which is my personal friend, because when I was ambassador to China, he was working as the department chief. So we've done a lot of things, including the state visit of then President Jiang Zemin to Ukraine in 2001. These examples and movement illustrate a growing awareness about the importance of the principles "nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine" in achieving sustainable peace. It's crucial for Ukraine, really, to maintain its strong alliances in the global north while simultaneously seeking new partnership in the global south. Although major breakthroughs in the global south have remained absent, Kyiv has partially compensated this by intensifying its diplomatic engagement in the region. 20-something years ago, as I told you, I was the first ambassador to major ASEAN founding states. Now we have separate embassies in Singapore, in Thailand, in Malaysia. And if we take African countries, the number of our embassies and ambassadors already appointed is growing constantly. Let me remind you that President Zelensky attended the Arab League Summit in Saudi Arabia, and that was absolutely unexpected attendance. And his subsequent participation in the G7 summit in Japan are notable examples of all this activity we are demonstrating to the whole world. Furthermore, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba continues to embark on extensive official diplomatic journeys, including visits to regions like sub-Saharan Africa, sometimes also for the first time. Nonetheless, it is important to acknowledge that this approach, while warranted and needed, is likely to yield results primarily in the long term. Diplomacy relies on trust building, which requires patience and time. Tragically, for Ukraine, due to the ongoing war, both come at the highest of prices, human life. Much like the counteroffensive on the battlefield, the expectations for Ukraine diplomatic efforts should be tempered by its limited resources. While one should not entirely rule out the possibility of major breakthroughs, considering Ukraine's proven ability to defy the unfavorable odds, the chances for such outcome are slim. Kiev's primary foreign policy tool during this time of war remains strategic communication, which involves addressing Russia's neo-imperialistic and aggressive behavior, countering its disinformation, and raising awareness about the severe violations of human rights and war crimes you know about. At the same time, Ukraine must adopt an official long-term strategy and continue to strengthen its institutional presence in the global south. But, and here I will criticize my colleagues because nothing in this world is perfect, first of all. And secondly, this is a very critical time for everybody. Ahead of the first anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky declared Russia to be the biggest anti-European force of the modern world in a speech to the European Parliament. By European, Zelensky was referring to the country's way of life, which was, he said, steeped in rules, values, equality, and fairness. Europe, he added, was a place where Ukraine is firmly at home. It was a prominent example of how Ukraine has come to focus on its relationship to Western civilization and its wartime public diplomacy. Other explains include popular rhetoric about Russia becoming more Asian as a result of its illegal war in Ukraine, or that Ukraine's struggle for national survival amounts to extending Europe's borders eastwards, as I told you before. But at a time when struggles for the values of democracy, equality, and fairness are taking place not only in Ukraine, but elsewhere in the world, from Myanmar to Palestine, this emphasis on the supposedly superior value of Western or European civilization is limited, to say the least. The presentation of Ukraine's struggle is set in a framework that sidelines similar fights in many countries of the global south. It focuses public attention on the prospect of a new European future, rather than a more consistent and universally shared, equal, and human one. One example, but very sound example. Several actions by Ukraine's diplomats in the global south in the past year have made me critical of the country's overall approach to wartime diplomacy. If we take Indonesia, I remind you that I used to be several years as ambassador of Ukraine to Indonesia. This country, whose years of domestic military dictatorship opened with the mass killing of communist sympathizers and others in 1965, 1966. And those events led to the overthrow of nationalist leader and Indonesia's first president Sukarno, and his replacement by Western-backed military dictator Suharto. I presented my credentials to President Suharto in 1997. Yeah, 1997. And he used to be, for that time, about 32 years in power. Although the country was a firm US ally during the dictatorship of Suharto, which lasted until 1998, right? And I do remember very clearly that that was the massive protest against the dictatorship, and our embassy used to be about 1 kilometer from the premises of the parliament, and that was the situation when I used to send my colleague who was living right by the embassy premises on the 22nd, 21st floor to see and report me what is going on in the parliament, where there were thousands and thousands of students, etc., etc., etc. And that was exactly the last days of dictator Suharto. I cannot forget this situation, and that was not the first time, because I used to see the same in Bangladesh, when the president, prime minister of Bangladesh were changing each other. And while one party becomes the ruling party, another party goes to the jail, etc. So, although I said the country was a firm ally of United States, many enough Indonesians have retained a fond appreciation for and memories of the years of cooperation with the Soviet Union, especially via exchanges in cuisine, culture, education, and shared politics are moving towards a non-capitalist, post-colonial future and a new world order. Indonesia has not been neutral over Russia's invasion of Ukraine, although domestically there have been debates on whether the country could have done more for Ukraine. It was voted in favor of all UN General Assembly resolutions calling for the withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukraine. Moreover, as the chair of the G20 summit in 2022, not only did Indonesian President Joko Widodo become the first statement for the Global South to visit wartime Kyiv, but he also allowed Zelensky to present virtually online his 10-point peace plan for the first time to the world at the summit. It is very important. But Ukrainian diplomats' language has not always fostered this support. On the one hand, speaking a week after the invasion, Ukraine's ambassador to Indonesia sought to invoke support from both the Indonesian government and its public. The current Ukraine's ambassador to Indonesia drew similarities between Indonesia's past anti-colonial wars of independence, notably against the Dutch and Japanese, and Ukraine's ongoing war of defense against Russia. He also emphasized that the invasion of Ukraine was a threat to world peace and the post-Second World War international security order. Indeed, as Indonesia's ambassador to Germany has argued, Russia's invasion does have ramifications for other smaller states that rely on international laws to defend their territorial integrity and sovereignty against great power bombing. Indonesia, in its dealings with China over the South China Sea, is one such instance. At the same time, however, our ambassador invoked Indonesia's bloody anti-communist past, telling his audience, "You, Indonesia, are a wise nation that was able to ward off communist seductions and to submit to them." He went further, claiming that today's Russia is a continuation of the communist regime. Maybe to some extent he's right. But in this situation, that was simply a mistake. I'll explain you why. While the brewing Islamic populism and anti-communism go hand in hand in contemporary Indonesian politics, the evocation of the memories of one of the 20th century's most bloody period of history, massacres that left between 500,000 and 1,000,000 people dead, you can imagine, at best revealed a lack of diplomatic judgment and sensitivity. At this moment, I can tell you my personal attitude to the position of China and my friend Ambassador Lehyuy. They are not condemning the aggression of Russian Federation to Ukraine. They call this war a Ukrainian crisis or Ukrainian conflict. And I do remember the time of one of the greatest massacres of all time, the so-called Nanjing massacre, when it was 300,000 people killed. And I just imagine if I or some other experts in Chinese affairs can remind this Ambassador Lehyuy that, listen, we may consider the Nanjing conflict or Nanjing crisis, and I cannot even imagine what will be the reaction of Chinese guys. It's almost the same. So the suffering of Indonesia of this period has just recently been acknowledged. It was only in January 2023 that Joko Widodo formally extended the Indonesian state's deep regrets with an acknowledgement that the 1965 massacres did indeed take place. On what grounds did our ambassador believe it was appropriate to intervene with the comments that seemed to stand against the historical, sensitive, and long-standing political agenda within Indonesia? That's gradual reconciliation and more candidates about the 1965 massacre. Later, the Indonesian Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned Ukrainian embassy, having expressed its displeasure and resentment over the comments which were seen as hurtful to Indonesians who consider Ukrainians as friends. We have to understand that if Ukraine is to make successful outreach to states outside Europe, it needs to recognize the similarity in struggles across the world for the same values of democracy, equality, and fairness, instead of centering the nation of civilization exclusively in Europe. And I do think that our diplomats should take a good lesson from all what happened to Indonesia. It also happened to guys in our embassy in Israel when this massacre took place. I mean, Hezbollah and Hamas against the Israeli Tzahal. Currently, Ukraine's foreign policy is reactive and selective approach, prioritizing the most urgent needs such as weapon delivery and grain transportation, while seeking to maintain or improve, if possible, relations with the countries whose support is essential for its victory in the war. If we take China, my personal attitude, we are not working hard on this issue because I have to admit that if your president does not visit China for the whole period of his sitting in his chair, 5 years, another our president does not visit China for another 5 years, another president, almost 5 years in power, also does not visit China. So how can we consider China as some country to support us 100%? I don't understand. And we have to understand this. I mean, everywhere, foreign ministry, presidential office, etc., etc., etc. I mean, the decision makers of Ukraine. In cases where room for constructive dialogue is limited, as with China and India, we didn't have ambassador of Ukraine to China for 26 months. 26 months. We don't have. We didn't have our ambassador to India, and now we have our ambassadors in China and in India, but they are not professional diplomats. They are not from the foreign ministry. Okay, they are very good, experienced guys, maybe, but I do think that such steps, like not having ambassadors for a long time in the key partner countries, or like in Kazakhstan, we don't have ambassador still, and in many other countries, not very important for us, like Czech Republic or Great Britain. We don't have ambassadors over there. In this case, you know, our foreign policy now is reactive and selective approach, and while seeking to maintain relations with these countries, we need do something more and more effective. Although Kyiv is racing against time, many neutral countries in the global south have also become increasingly concerned about daunting prospects of a prolonged war in Ukraine. Ukraine plans to massively scale up its diplomatic presence in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, as it works with Western countries' allies to blunt Russia's political ground and economic ties across the world. Ukraine also plans to tap a new wave of ambassadors, as you know. It was openly declared that we will open many new embassies in nearly 24 countries, from Ghana to Malaysia, where also there is no Ukrainian ambassador now, as it tries to marshal more global support for its struggle against Russia's invasion beyond Europe and North America. The plan would see Ukraine open 10 embassies in Africa, as well as one in Guatemala. The initiative, first announced by Ukrainian Foreign Minister Kuleba in March last year, is picking up pace in the coming months, and showcases key plans to counter Russia claims that much of the world outside of NATO either supports or is indifferent to Russia's bloody land grabs in Ukraine. Even after Moscow faced a stunning rebuke in the UN General Assembly vote that condemned this invasion last year. Minister Kuleba is traveling a lot, trying to gain support from the countries of global south. He is approaching Ukraine's diplomatic push much as Zelensky fictional TV character, you remember, the Slave of the People movie, when the hero used to say that they are opening the job to anyone. Now we are doing the same in the sphere of diplomacy. When Ukraine began sketching plans to build Kiev's diplomatic presence in the global south, after decades of the war-torn country struggling to find diplomats for top posts, Mr. Minister said he realized that the choice of ambassadors for African countries was critically limited. He said, I didn't want to choose the best of the rest from inside of the diplomatic system. This moment made me realize that the time of the revolution has come. And later he said that he has received 1,038 applications for 21 ambassadorial positions posted publicly online. Some can say that the process helped Ukraine find ambassadors to China and India outside of the diplomatic system, as I told you. The vacancies include relatively interesting posts, such as in Czech Republic, Norway, but also less silver-plated postings, such as Rwanda, Mozambique, Ivory Coast, Ghana, or Angola. Now we are planning to have embassies over there, and that is why ambassadors are being found from the people. And when Ukrainian diplomats show up, officials believe they will be armed with a powerful narrative. I think the most important narrative is for us to show that this is a colonial war, that Russia is acting as a colonial empire. That's something which African countries should understand, and not only African countries. Ukraine is fighting for its independence and sovereignty. With the Turkish brokered deal allowing safe Black Sea passage of Ukrainian grain to Africa and Middle East, set to expire later, the case for Kiev's engagement is only growing. Africa and the Middle East rely on Ukrainian grains, and not only Africa and Middle East, China also, and a lot of Asian countries also. East rely on Ukrainian grains. South, global South, rely on Ukrainian grain. Our foreign minister said Ukrainian officials has already identified 30 very strong candidates for ambassadors positions that are going through tests and being invited for interviews. And about 100 more applicants who aren't qualified to become ambassadors, but will serve job offers to become lower ranking. I personally don't believe this can help, because we do have the Kyiv Institute for International Relations. We do have diplomatic academy. We have a lot of qualified diplomats which were serving recently in various countries very effectively, and they are being on their pension positions. But this is something which made Ukraine's diplomacy actually great past years. And they got experience, and they got very good effective ties and contacts, which can be now effectively used to get the support from the global South countries. Oh, I do think that some of these countries, especially in Africa, and I'm sure it is a fact, they depend on Russia. They have a very close relationship. And for them, it's like shooting themselves in the foot, the sanction, you know. Most countries worldwide have declined to join Western sanctions regimes, and some major economic powers, such as India and Turkey, continue to import Russian oil and gas, and China also. A key revenue stream for Moscow. In the Middle East, Iran is supplying Russia with sorely needed weapons and drones. North Korea, country nominally aligned with the United States, including the United Arab Emirates, have become a major new hub for Russian trade and evading Western sanctions. The United States this month also accused South Africa of secretly sending arms and ammunition to Russia, highlighting that Moscow's efforts to maintain its political and economic ties beyond the West are paying off in some form. Diplomacy in times of war and peace isn't only about maximizing your country's national interests. It's also about conveying to the world what values you would like the world to understand and preferably share with you in mutual solidarity, respect, and admiration. Can Ukraine become a source of inspiration and for an independent and progressive political agency that rejects the civilizational traps for both the West and Russia? One can only hope so. Therefore, Kiev's cautious approach may ultimately fail. Last, but certainly not least, Ukraine cannot match Russia's extensive presence and diplomatic outreach in the region, I mean global south, unless it aligns closely with its Western partners to reconsider their strategy towards the global south amid shifting strategic and security dynamics. Therefore, it is crucial for Ukraine to maintain its strong alliances in a global north while simultaneously seeking new partnership in a global south. I thank you for your attention and ready to answer your question, please.
Thank you so much, Honorable Ambassador. Dear audience, do you have any questions? Please, could you tell me how much time do we have for questions?
Oh, 15, 20 minutes we have.
15, 20 minutes. Okay, so dear audience, whether someone has any questions, please raise your hand or switch on your microphone and please ask. I don't see any hands. Or
so everything is so clear that there are no questions, right?
Basically, I think. Oh yeah, please, Mr. Ahmed, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you. That was a wonderful discussion that was there. First of all, am I audible, sir? Am I audible? Okay, okay, great. So that was the discussion of that was a pretty much that was in my mind, and from the perspective that the global south think of how the Russian aggression has come down, and also you have nicely put it down some of the most critical thinking that Ukrainian president or Ukrainian thoughts that would have that has on social mind of global south. You have talked about points like the common ground of how Ukrainians see as is it as a colonial war that would be sympathizing with the global south like Africa and in the or more precisely in the south subcontinent and Indian subcontinent and region. So I think I'm totally agree with you in the point where you said the Ukraine should be more practical, and Ukraine should be understand the perspective of the global south and understand the priorities of the global south. My question is, and my question is like on the other hand side, from my country's perspective, like previously when the era was in the Soviet Union or USSR was a part of the global whole, when that was a part of USSR, then Indian subcontinent, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India or Pakistan, both of these countries were heavily invested or heavily dependent on, at least on the economic side part of the lifestyle of the USSR. But as China has grown apart with their recent escalation in their sectors like economic sectors, technological and military defense, the polarity of this is shifting by part a lot. And for my country, we are heavily more depending on the side of China, and China has economic benefit and multilateral benefits countries with Southeast Asia and in the Pacific a lot. So my question is, how is Chinese support for Russia impacting the efforts for isolating Russia? Like how this can be a channel for Ukraine to talk with China, depending with the question of depending as a channel for backing with Russia. Also, what role could China potentially play in mediating the conflict or in mediating the war? Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your question. The matter is that China, as any other state, they are pursuing their own state interests. That means that if the situation is as follows, if we have a war of Russia against Ukraine, China is the strategic partner for both Russia and Ukraine. But as I told you, if Russian president, prime minister, ministers, etc., they are visiting China once or twice a year. They are receiving Chinese president in Moscow, and the contacts are very regular. There are dozens of meetings they have between leader of China and leader of Russian Federation. In comparison with Ukraine, they're doing a great job, or we are not doing the same. And answering your question, how Ukraine can consider the support of China towards
Yes,
Russia, I can tell you that it is not actually supporting the war. It is purely pursuing economic interests and global interests of China, because, as I told you, I see only two poles in this world: United States and China. The task of China is to get more supporters from all over the world. And one thing. Another thing is that if we, China, can have the Russian oil and gas, so why don't we take it? Because in this time, it is something being sold to us cheaper. Of course, Iranian oil is much more cheaper, and we Chinese are trying to get the same conditions from Russia also. Otherwise, it will be something which contradicts the interest of China. Regarding support by the weaponry, say, last year, from the 1st of September, China announced that it will not sell drones to Ukraine and Russia, both. Now we have several Chinese banks which cut relations with the Russian companies. Ukraine recently put into the list of war sponsors 14 Chinese companies. And it was a reaction from China that this can be something which can touch the current relations between China and Ukraine. Of course, why not? But Chinese companies are very cautious about the sanctions introduced by the Western countries, including the United States, against Russian companies. And if Chinese companies want to be out of these sanctions, they do the same thing. I mean, they cut relations with Russian companies. So this is something we have to understand. China is a very, very, very pragmatic country, seeking for their own interests, especially now when the economic situation is not very good. But how come it's not very good? If you know that almost all the countries, including G7, etc., 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 having, let me give you the absolutely concrete figures of what I mean, that the total GDP of Germany, France, United Kingdom, Italy, Spain, Netherlands, Poland, Australia, Japan, and South Korea is 25.7 trillions, while the GDP of the United States is 26 trillions. At the same time, the GDP of China in last year, 17.52 trillion. We have to understand that we are dealing with the second pole of this modern world. And it is because of their own interests, and when everything is directed to reach these goals, makes this country a second pole. Did I answer your question?
Yes, that was pretty much okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? So if not, I would like to, on behalf of the Civil Diplomacy Foundation, express my gratitude and appreciation for this fascinating lecture. I do believe it will be very useful for young specialists and impress them to pay more attention on other parts of the world except European countries, for instance. And if you want to see our Ukraine strong all over the world, I think you gave excellent recommendations how to do it abroad. So how to be good diplomats and how to pay any possible efforts to improve the imagination about Ukraine in the global arena. So thank you so much, Honorable Ambassador. This lecture may be found in our YouTube channels. Thanks everyone who joined us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. I wish you all the best.
Wish you all the best too.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.